So I built a tool that could help with that. That was the first year. In the first year in 2021, I started the year with one paying subscriber, which was her, and I ended the year with 132 firms. And then we've been steadily growing ever since.
Hello and welcome to The Modern Consultant. I'm your host, Mark Ahrens, and today I have the pleasure of talking with Wouter, the founder of Decision Vault, a software as a service, a SaaS app that helps legal practices, estate planning attorneys simplify the flow of data in their practice so that they can also have easier client intake. And in the space of just 1 year, he has gone from one paying user, his wife, to over 100 legal firms. His story is incredible. So many lessons inside here for anyone who is thinking about going down the software as a service route. Also, reasons to not go down that route. If you are, say, a technical versus non-technical founder, we also talk about his journey of hitchhiking through 22 countries. And how that applies to the journey of entrepreneurship. There is so much for us to cover, and I can't wait for you to learn from Wouter, who has been a dear friend for over 10 years at this point. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the other side. You have, on one trip, hitchhiked through 23 countries. And something that we were talking about before this was how that has influenced how you look at entrepreneurship. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. So in 2011, I hitchhiked from Amsterdam to Tokyo, which was a 9-month journey through 23 countries. Spent a month in Turkey, spent a month in Iran, went through the Stans, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. And like when I talk to people about that, like the first thing to maybe call out is that like hitchhiking works a little bit differently than what people assume. Like people, when you mention hitchhiking, people think, oh, like this scruffy dude standing beside the road in the rain that nobody picks up, right? It's like, yeah, sometimes you have to do that. But especially in Western Europe, where I'm originally from, hitchhiking like goes a lot easier and faster than that because you just go from gas station to gas station, which are right on the highway. You talk to people and then you get on your way, right? So like, it's not really about standing by the side of the road. And actually, oftentimes when we were hitchhiking from Amsterdam to Berlin, we would be there faster than the train would get there because like the Germans drive really fast on the Autobahn, and like talking to them at the gas station goes really fast. The second thing to know about hitchhiking is that it's 20% tactics and 80% mental game. So like I can teach you the tactics pretty easily in 15 minutes and kind of point out how this works. But then when you're standing there by the side of the road, or when you're standing there at the gas station and you walk up to people and you get rejected again and again and again, like it's much more of a mental game where and that like you're constantly pitching, you're constantly talking to people, but you're also constantly taking in new information. So people say like, oh, what if it doesn't work? It's like, well, just like in entrepreneurship, you try something for an hour and you ask like 50 people, and maybe nobody is going the direction you're trying to go in. So like, how can you adjust and what can you do different to keep moving, right? Like it's never like this question always is interesting to me of like, what if it doesn't work? Well, I have the whole day. So like I'm changing my approach until something works. Or like at some point, yes, I might hitchhike into the town and like take a train or a bus. If it's like at the end of the day and it's getting dark, but that only ever happened like once or twice. Most of the time it's fine. You keep changing your approach. So that's definitely how sort of it has been good training for entrepreneurship, where those skills like also are necessary every day, right?
Yeah, there is a particular sentence you said in there that I just really wanted to hone in on, which is, it's the being prepared mentally for change. And that really is like the underpinning of all anyone's entrepreneurship journey, and especially yours, because in your own journey, I know that you have gone from financial engineering to like consulting to now being the founder of Decision Vault, where you guys have now up to I think like 130 paying subscribers. And I'd love to hear more about how you even begun that journey and got to the point that you're at right now.
Yeah, so Decision Vault is a intake software for attorneys, right? So it grew out of my wife's law firm. She's an estate planning attorney. And in the beginning of 2020, she had a matter in her practice where a client wanted to nominate 37 beneficiaries. And what that means is that like all the names of all these 37 beneficiaries like need to find their way into the document, right? And it's fine for the client to nominate whoever they want to nominate. That's part of the estate planning process. But my wife at the time was a true solo. And what it meant for her was that she was typing all the names and all the addresses and all the phone numbers and all the date of births into the next tool where she needed to like draft these documents. So that particular matter kind of prompted us to say, hey, there must be a better way. It's 2020. Somebody must have figured this out where you can have the client fill something in and just have that information flow into the other tools. And as I looked into that back then, I found that some tools integrated with some of the others. But the real limitation was on the intake forms to begin with. They were not good enough to capture all the info, meaning that like even if the tools integrated that were to come to follow, you couldn't capture the information. So still you would end up entering all that info yourself, which like is a administrative overhead that should just be avoided. So that prompted me to start prototyping some. That prompted me to like start building some software. And as I spoke to more and more of her estate planning friends, I found like, yes, everyone is facing this problem. So I built a tool that could help with that. And actually a correction to what you just said, that was the first year. In the first year in 2021, I started the year with one paying subscriber, which was her. And I ended the year with 132 firms. And then we've been steadily growing ever since. So that really kind of lots of things came together in making it possible for me to like be able to like execute on that, right? Like go through that journey, the entrepreneurial and creation journey of creating the software, including like the whole hitchhiking background.
Yeah, so that's phenomenal. And as you said that, like years of Julia walking into the room and fighting you for the printer are coming back to mind. It's fantastic. And now you guys have two printers. We've come very far.
Yeah.
But there's something else in the journey that I want to dive into, which is before getting the first customer, because, well, before, getting your wife and the additional customers. But I know there are people who are listening into this who are at this juncture where they're thinking to themselves, okay, I could be going down multiple routes. I could be becoming an independent consultant, I could be leaving a big four company, or, I could be launching an information product as a way to be able to scale, or I could be going down the route of maybe even starting software as a service, developing an app. How do I even begin to think through which of these pathways I should be going down?
Yeah. And, there's a couple things that come to mind there, right? The first is, so I'm part of a community of B2B bootstrapped SaaS founders. So like business to business, bootstrapped meaning it's self-funded. We don't have any investors. We just like funded this whole thing out of our own pocket. And it's called MicroConf. And there's a good talk that people should check out called the Ultimate Bootstrapped Business or something by Jason Cohen. It's on the MicroConf YouTube channel. And in there, I think what's important to when you're thinking of potentially diving into software, to get the model right from the beginning, right? To get like if there's anything you can build, then maybe you want to start building like in the right direction rather than something that will be harder to get started on. So the first thing is you probably will want to do B2B rather than B2C, right? Build software for businesses rather than building software for consumers.
Why is that?
Well, first of all, businesses are used to spending money to solve problems. And consumers are really hard to get them to pay for anything, right? Like just imagine Gmail trying to charging money for the Gmail app.
Yeah.
Like that's probably not going to go over too well. And that they have 2 billion users or something, right? So it's hard to get consumers to pay. It's hard to get in front of consumers. There's lots of there's competition there with all the marketing that's going on. So B2B is a better choice, especially if you're bootstrapping it. If you have an idea and you want to go venture funded and you can make that happen, that works too, but probably you need venture funding to go after B2C problems rather than B2B, just like what I did with Decision Vault. You can solve somebody's problem. You can get paid for that. And like as you add a couple more, the numbers start adding up of like how much money you're bringing in, which is sort of the second point. You want to make sure you're charging enough. So like putting an app on the market at like $5, $10, $20 a month, that's pretty tricky to like make the economics work, especially if you're a non-technical founder and you're not doing the development yourself. So like I am a technical founder. I wrote the whole thing myself. So that means that I don't have to go spend 50 to 100K on like the first version of the thing. So if you have to outsource the initial version, and then also if you have maybe multiple co-founders, then like you cannot do $19 a month. It has to be like $50, $70, $100 a month. Like just go for $100 a month, which sets some requirements for what the software should do, right? So it restricts you in a way, but it kind of helps because now you have to think through like what kind of problems am I solving that are worth $100 a month for this business to solve through this piece of software. So that kind of helps assess what the kind of ideas that you're maybe thinking of to see if they are helpful, if that's going to work.
So this is already insanely valuable, and it's also reminding me of a tool that you had shared with me that I actually found very helpful for being able to quickly build out a financial model instead of doing it in like a spreadsheet, to be able to just, again, come up with some basic math to see like what the structure of what it is that you're trying to build, if it makes sense, profitability wise. You remember the name of that?
Yeah, it's Use Summit.
Yes.
So Summit, it's kind of like it looks like a flow chart at first, and then you define a financial model, but sort of in a flow chart way, and then you click run, and then it actually spits out a spreadsheet. But what it does is it makes it a lot faster and easier to build up these sort of calculators for your run rate or for your growth. Like I have a finance degree. I am very comfortable in Excel, but it always takes so much time to change models around. And I like this tool because it helps to quickly, like, especially once you start changing and experimenting, it just makes it a lot easier to move things around, because in Excel you would have to like change your whole thing and change all the rows and change all so that's indeed a nice one to kind of think through and model through it.
It's really interesting. Like, I always appreciate our conversations when we're talking about, SaaS, because I'm always learning and discovering parallels between that and the online course world, which is, where I help a lot of my clients with productization. But regardless of the business model, you're always needing to be able to do some kind of forecasting, to see what expenses might be, always see what revenue might look like, see what, customer acquisition rates and everything might look like. I found it helpful for that. And the other parallel between the business models that I noticed is I usually make a recommendation for people to start medium or high ticket for the similar reason. And there's also a case for going more a B2B route versus B2C, because basically B2C means you're going to need volume. And if you're planning to bootstrap things, then it's going to take a lot of resources and time to basically build up a large audience, regardless of whatever business model you're looking at. But that also reminds me about something else that I wanted to dig into with you, which you also mentioned, which is you're a technical founder. What recommendations might you have for somebody that is a non-technical founder, and should they even be looking at SaaS, as a potential evolution of their business model versus something else?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that this morning, and I think I can best illustrate it through a story, right? So in when I came back from the big hitchhiking to Tokyo trip, I was hired by a sort of consultancy out of Brussels, and I moved to Brussels. And I was hired based on my finance background, but I didn't really have anything in finance for me to work on. Mm-hmm. But then one day, this one business manager pulled me along and to a meeting at the main Belgian telecom operator, Belgacom. And I walked into this room, and there were the two hiring guys, the hiring managers were sitting there on the other side of the table. And I sat down, and the guy was flipping through my resume and my profile, and he kind of threw it on the table. It's okay, well, we'll just give him a case because obviously he doesn't have the experience. So we'll see how this goes. And then he left the room. It's okay, this is great. And so they gave me this case, and the role was to be a functional analyst. So functional analyst in that sense was the person sitting in between and translating between the business domain and the technical domain to decide how and what to build when it comes to building internal tools for this enterprise company. And the case was about oh yeah, we need an app that does this, etc. So I drew some screens, and I had some ideas on this is how we can model the database. And when the guy came back, I outlined that all for him. So for my business manager, who walked into the room where the guy was throwing my resume on the table and then left to go have coffee downstairs, that was his impression of oh, this is not going to go anywhere. When he came back into the room, the first thing that the business stakeholder said to him was okay, this is great. He's hired. When can he start? So in that role, I was responsible for doing that translation and running these improvements that the business stakeholders needed for on the internal tools that the telecom operator was using. And as I kind of watched that process, I saw that business asks for something, we write it down in a descriptive way, words on a paper, that goes to the outsourced Indian developers. 3 months later, it comes back, we show it to the business side, and they reject it because that's not what we asked for. It's that's exactly what you asked for. Yeah. That's what we wrote down. We had all these requirements, all these things that you wanted. So what I started to do was, hey, okay, got it. I would take a couple days extra because it goes pretty quick. If you do it in the way that I'm about to describe, is I would take a screenshot of the current application. I would then take a tool called Axure, Axure. You can also draw these things out in Balsamiq with a Q at the end. And what I would do is I would build up in just a click-through prototype. It doesn't do anything for real, but just click through what I had heard the business owner wanted. And then 2 days later, I would book a meeting with them. I would put it in front of them. I would give them the mouse, and they would start clicking on things that I had not anticipated. But they were then telling me, oh, no, this is okay. I see this, but this is not what we want. We want it this way. So after 3 of those iterations, now I ended up with a click-through prototype that the business side was happy with and could understand that it solved their need. And then on the other side, when I shipped it off to the outsourced developers, they would not have words on a page that they would have to interpret. They would look at this prototype, and then they could build it much faster. So that, doing a couple of those projects then made the business say, okay, great, you got this. Let's no longer do these €100,000 projects. We have this one bigger project of 5 million that has shipwrecked. Why don't you go help solve that? So when you in that role, I kind of was acting like a non-technical founder in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was not writing the code, but I was defining it in a way that like acknowledges that software is somewhat malleable. So like one of the uh, holes that non-technical founders fall in when it comes to making software is they try. It's very easy to describe. Oh, I have this idea. Like this is how it's all gonna work. But there's many, as you and I both know, from like product creation, from the product creation process. There are many things that go into product creation, right? So like if you think you can just define it and write it down, or like even sketch it out and then hand it off to build, that's a dangerous thing to do, and it's easy to waste a lot of money that way. Because like once you start having a piece of software, like there's so many assumptions that are in that stack of written down statement, right? Like there's the problem solution assumption that like they want this solved in this way, and then there's also the implementation assumption of this solution is implemented in this way. So like what I actually did when I put this into practice and was building the first initial pieces of what later evolved into Decision Vault, I was building like a little ugly prototype in like Microsoft Word where like, this is the report of how it comes out, right? I was writing some Python code that would like push stuff into an API, and like, this is how it might sync over. Like I'm not building a product. I'm trying to test sort of what these pieces are. And then like take it one step at a time to see if that sort of fits.
Yeah. There's so many gems in there, from just being able to break down, scope out, the productization process, if you will, the job to be done there, which is, and you mentioned about, okay, problem solution fit, clearly defining what the problem is to be solved, which then also implies that you have a specific group of people, an audience segment that you're trying to serve, who then have this problem or problem set of problems. And then what are the solutions that you're going to need to then solve that set of problems, which is different from the implementation of it, which in my world, in my language, might include, conversations around, the different kinds of product containers we might have, a course versus like a workshop or a mastermind, and how long it's going to be, and what are the dimensions of the product, basically, to be able to help them fulfill it within the context of when and where they're going to actually be using it. All of that leads.
And
sorry,
I think
go ahead.
In that story and kind of how I just ran through that, if I were to summarize that for a non-technical founder, I would say that like what we said earlier, it starts from, let's just say you're going to build software. Let's as a benchmark say it costs $100 a month and it's for B2B, right? B2B, you can go out, you can find these people, you can like open the yellow pages if you can find one, like and like go find these people, go talk to them. And like if that's sort of the baseline, that's the better word, then like what problem are you solving? But with that, and I was listening to the Margot episode that you did a couple of weeks ago, yesterday. She mentioned the book The Mom Test. I forgot the guy's name, but excellent book. Focus on that audience and focus on that problem that they're having, not so much on your solution. Sure, you want to build a solution for them, but it's much more important to focus on that problem and look at it through the lens of like, if I'm charging them $100 a month, they probably should get $1,000 of value out of using this thing, right? So like, what am I solving, and is it worth it? Yeah. And then go into trying to duct tape some things together to kind of do it manually and kind of like build a first draft, if you will. And you don't need a developer for that, right? You can mess around with tools like Bubble or Glide, I think is a little bit easier, accessible, no-code platform. I would be really careful with building a full trying to build a real software as a service on top of one of these no-code solutions, because scaling is hard.
Mm.
Like there's just lots of downsides that come with it, but they're phenomenal for you to just quickly click some things together and try to start testing, right? Like you can do stuff with Zapier or Make and like, or just with Excel or just like the what they call the Wizard of Oz
Yep.
minimum viable product
Just
of like,
leave it out.
it's
Yep.
just you behind the scenes doing these things and pushing these buttons. And that's okay because we're not trying in this first phase, you're not trying to build software. You're trying to like validate that there's something there, like that there's a problem worth solving. Because if there is, then like and it is like $100 a month, then that brings in revenue pretty fast, which means that you can spend money on like some outsourced help to like build the software, right? But you need to first know how it'll work, and how it'll deliver value, and then you can have it built.
This is really cool because there's like two threads in my mind here. There's so many parallels again between like the product validation process for software as a service, as well as online course and program development, because again, you want to be able to break it down into these stages of validating the right things in the right order. Because if you will, the audience is the independent variable, and then it's like, all right, now you want to go through and make sure all of your cascading assumptions are going to be right, so that you can ultimately build something that is going to solve a problem, as you say, that's worth solving. The other thing within that I want to dive into is a bit more of how to determine which path one might best go down. And maybe we even just dig in a little bit into your own story. What made you decide to go down the technical founder route of building software versus, online course development? Because I'm pretty sure that there's going to be some people, I have past clients I know for certain, who actually considered the online course route as well, and ultimately building and going down the service or SaaS route was the thing that got them to like a 1 million run rate. And so I'm curious to hear what your experience with that is.
Yeah, so when I came to the US in 2014, and then for the first couple of years here, I worked in a consultancy with my brother-in-law. And we were doing some very different things, like leadership development, kind of offsites and facilitated events. And just before the pandemic, kind of like the 2019 timeframe, that was kind of winding down. And I was looking to see like what would I do next. And I actually just was working on several things at once. I had like I got my commercial drone license, and I was looking into like doing something with drone photography, semiotic, like the videography. I was looking into the field called robotic process automation, which is like little widgets that run on a desktop and can control a computer like a human does. So that's a way to kind of automate really old software, right? Like if you have SAP, then like you can have one of these robots run on a little desktop and control the computer. So now you've automated in a way SAP without all the extra cost of building actual software that replaces SAP.
Just one question for those who might not be familiar. What is SAP?
Oh, SAP is like a big enterprise resource planning ERP tool, right? So like it runs like all the procurement and like the inner workings of big Fortune 500 companies typically run on SAP. It's like Salesforce, but then not for selling things to people, but like it runs the innards of procurement, like warehousing, logistics, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I was looking into drones. I was looking into robotic process automation, and I was looking into like this sort of helping Julia solve a problem in her law firm, and like how can we do this smarter? And I wasn't really trying to analyze and decide which one to do. I was just doing them, right? So like I did one commercial drone project where I took like photos and videos of this like warehouse close by here for like a friend of mine who does commercial real estate here in Denver. I like got on several calls, and then through another friend here in Denver, I was like looking to see how we could implement RPA into like an HR company here. So like I was actually doing the things. But then in looking at like these different test projects, it became clear that like the software as a service route would like ultimately be more scalable and result in a bigger business, right? Like drones are great and they're fun, but it's just me running around taking some like photos and videos, but like that's kind of like hourly rate, like trading hours for dollars. RPA kind of scales, but not as much as software as a service. So I was not trying to decide up front. I've done plenty of this. When we first connected, I was living in Brussels. I spent 2 years there, and I was going through all Ramit's material, and I was doing a lot of planning, but not taking lots of action. So like I made all these plans, and then was a little scared and didn't take enough action, and then I kind of come back around to sort of see like, oh no, the plan was not good enough. So like I spent quite some time stuck in that loop back in the day. So that's when in 2019 I was going through some of this. I was like acting first and then seeing what results I would see in the real world, and then like based it on that.
So within what you shared, there was an implied statement I want to tease out, which was actually about Julia. And ultimately, you started with an audience of 1. And then you increased, to a small group before now serving over 100, law firms. Could you talk about the importance of staging out and also testing whatever it is that you're doing, whether or not it's SaaS, whether it's service, whether or not, productization?
Yeah, I think a lot of people start with the audience of 1 being, I have this idea. This idea is amazing. I'm going to build this idea. When it comes to software, we all have these ideas, right? But it's different if it's like there's a person here and they're trying to do something, and like there's lots of frameworks and things around it, but like it's really like in this case the profile was estate planning attorney. Okay, what are they trying to do? They're trying to create these documents in a way that doesn't take so much time on manual entry. So yeah, I firsthand experienced this because I was helping my wife do some of these things, and then I spoke to several of her friends. So like it is pretty easy to go wrong when you're trying to too early try to like build up avatars, right? Because you're just hallucinating. It's fake. Like there is no person like that. Especially if you try to do like there's all these joke article write-ups about like the fact that they are a certain age and live in a certain neighborhood doesn't really determine why they just bought this or didn't buy this, right? So like behavior is lots more important when it comes to avatars. But like the professional role, and this again is why I would nudge people towards looking at B2B, is like there's a professional, they're trying to do something in a professional capacity because they're trying to make like and deliver the value to their client and get a certain payout, right? So like that is taking them, either you can save them time or you can save them money, or you can just make things easier for them and it's more fun. But like, what is that thing? And then yes, like you can talk. I got the exposure easily because it's like somebody close to you. It was my wife. And then she's in all like, I kind of got lucky in the sense of the niche. Like she's in all these groups with all these estate planning attorneys, and they all talk to each other, right? So then like it's easy to connect with them if you like have the personal connection. But you can find them, they all talk to each other. So like word of mouth has been like the biggest thing that's driving the growth of the business. But like professional roles are much easier to find people into than it is to like go B2C and find someone who might be like interested in topic X, right? Like it's hard because you're competing now with everyone else who's marketing to consumers. But if you want to find a plumber, like you can go on Google, or you can go on the Yellow Pages, you can find a plumber, or you might know a plumber, or like, right? So like it's you can reach these people.
There's two things in there that I really want to underline, which I think is hugely important. It builds on one of the ideas that you put forth earlier in the conversation, which is focusing on B2B versus B2C, particularly if you're bootstrapping. And then if we build on that, in the selection of a B2B market, regardless of what delivery model you're thinking about doing or what business model, there is getting clear on their identity. And in this instance, through their role. And as you said, very easy to be able to say, okay, what role, what capacity, what name or category of business person this is. So you then go search for them and find them on whatever platform, whether you're doing cold outreach, whether you're doing inbound, or whatever the case may be, finding groups. And then the second thing that stood out to me was, what is the job to be done? Functionally, what are they trying to do within the context of that role? Some people might just call it like a goal, but like using, if we define it within the functional, what are the things that they need to do? It becomes very clear and also measurable whether or not in ideation you're focusing on the right thing, and also when you come up with the first prototype, whether or not your prototype actually accomplishes the function that they're actually trying to perform. So like, I think that's really, really helpful, not just for like the SaaS world, but also for the world that I operate in. And I have many more thoughts, but I want to hit the pause button just in case there's anything you want to share on that.
No, I agree with those two things.
Perfect. So I also want to talk, we've spoken a bit about the past. We've also spoken a bit about the present, how you came to be where you are now. Where do you see Decision Vault going in the future? I know you and I have spoken about you now zooming out to say like, okay, well, this is like a real business. How are you thinking about where you're going and what comes next?
Yeah, so like the thing with the hitchhiking journey is that it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So it has made me it has trained me very well for like, okay, there's adversity, great, like let's find another way, let's find another way. But the downside of it has been a little bit that I am self-reliant to a fault. So the next growth journey for me is to like expand the team. I just bringing on 2 new team members next week nice. to like on customer success side and on some admin support for me. That will be like the next growth curve for me, is to like learn how to be a leader and how to work more through other people's efforts rather than just knuckling it out on my own. And then for the growth of the business, we're self-funded, so we can grow at the rate that we want. It's growing very nicely, and we have plenty more integrations to build. And I, because of the like, I have constant conversations with attorneys and with clients, so I know for the next 2 years what what extra functionality and features we need to build. Like I don't need any more input on that. But then it's also, and it's maybe that's one of the things that Jason Cohen touches on in his talk, is like I integrate with different tools. Like there's tools on the document automation side, there's tools on like the legal CRM side. They like are in a massive competitor race because there's like 9 or 10 or 12 of those tools. So they have massive engineering teams and massive like marketing teams, and like they're just like cutthroat competition. We're kind of working with everyone, and we're sitting in the middle, and there's like 2 other companies that do something similar to what we're doing, but with a different focus. So we can just grow at our own pace and like have fun with it. So that's the goal.
That is, one, is really cool, but 2, there's a tiny decision point in there that is hidden that I want to like almost tease out that is really interesting, which is the hiring. You said the customer support role and then also the admin support role. And I remember in previous conversations that you were even thinking about, should I maybe hire a developer first versus these roles? And you mentioned, I think, a book that you had read that helped to guide your thinking on which roles to like hire for first. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. So this it's a book called "Buy Back Your Time," written by Dan Martell. And Dan Martell has a company called B2B SaaS Academy. So he himself has founded and exited several B2B SaaS companies, and now is sort of active in the group coaching and direct coaching and courses world when it comes to like getting founders to build better B2B SaaS businesses. And his thesis of the book is that like he works with a lot of founders. Typically, people and I was like kind of going down the same path. Look at, okay, what am I spending time on? And like, what can I sort of like outsource and hire for? So people hire a developer and hire a marketer and hire like these different people in different roles with the focus on like getting sort of all the business aspects covered. But then what it does is that then the founder kind of does all the in-between stuff and ends up being the firm administrator. And then he, in the book, recalls that he, like Dan, oftentimes encounters founders at like the several million ARR, annual recurring revenue level, with a team of like 9 to 12, and they just hate it because like it's not fun anymore. They're just like doing the in-between jobs. They're not focused on the thing that they are uniquely good at. And like that is a path that then typically leads to like the person either self-sabotaging, selling the business, or like closing it down, right? So I was thinking last year about like, maybe I can go faster if I hire a developer. But for now, I've been a developer and the head of product and the person talking to the clients. And so I know everything from talking to the clients all the way through like knowing how the database is structured, right? And there's a competitive advantage in that because I can move so fast because I don't have to have a meeting with anyone. I like start sketching out the stuff and like plan out what to build and when to build it. So what I took away from that book is Dan sketches out the ladder of replacement, he calls it. So like first, get rid of like the admin tasks, like stuff in email, scheduling, etc. And he calls them $10 tasks. Like it's not worth your time. Like get that first, then delivery. So like in the SaaS sense, that would be like customer support, onboarding, etc. Then hand off marketing, and then like hand off like sales is sort of like one of the fourth one. And the fifth one, I think, is like, then it's leadership. So if you wanted at some point when this thing has grown to like take a step back and like have somebody else run the day-to-day as like a CEO.
Yeah.
So I'm like focused now on taking that path rather than bringing on a developer, which is going to cost quite a bit of money. And then it would shift my role into defining what to build. But now I have to like go write that down or go sketch that out or go build little prototypes. Like that would fundamentally change like how I operate in this business. And I feel like I would spend way more money than like on hiring like customer success person and an executive assistant. So I'm going that route first or going that route now. And that way freeing up time that I can spend more time on product development and driving the business in this way. Yeah.
So that is so helpful. There's many parallels between that and again the online course and program world, because ultimately you need to. It goes back to what you had mentioned before we got onto that thread, which is like, people getting to a team of like 10 to 12 and then they're in a role that they no longer personally enjoy, and it's kind of killing their, passion and stuff for the business. I relate to that at the stage of growth that we're at, I'm wearing hats where I know I'm not the best. I can get it done. but I know that I'm not the best at it. And so it's giving me personal insights as far as like how to think about that. Something else, though, that you shared in the previous answer was integration partners. Could you tell us more about how you have gone about just even securing integration partners with who are basically the key players in your particular niche?
Yeah. So, like in the beginnings, in the humble beginnings, it's hard, right? Like you're kind of unknown, you're nobody. Like you show up and you want to build an integration with someone. There are several tools in the space that are very set up to have many integrations. So, like one of them, I could just schedule a call and get on a call with the integrations person, and then they throw a developer account at you, and then you can go on your way and you can build it with them. But there are others that like it took a year of follow-up and like introductions from like 5 different angles before like there was action taken to grant me access and like to then be able to then build an integration. So typically with these integrations, I would need access to that tool. I need access to the API, and then like Decision Vault is typically a consumer of the other person's or the other company's API. So like we're using their API. So it's no development effort on their end. It's all the development effort is on us, but they kind of need to grant access. So that's where, I don't know, it feels a little bit like hitchhiking sometimes. Like I want to go in a certain direction and like, I'll ask here, I'll ask there. And like, we'll just ask again and just follow up in a different way. And you keep going until you finally like get there.
It
Yeah.
it makes me think about really just on a more meta level partnership, because ultimately the integration partners, they're a bit of a delivery partner to be able to deliver whatever it is the core value proposition is, for the product and or service, or course or program it is that you're delivering. And then that thinking then also extends to marketing partners, and then also sales partners. Someone might be just doing direct referrals for someone to become a customer or client, and so then sales, partnerships. And then on the marketing side, if it's just awareness for lead generation, then again, partnering with that person who perhaps has an ideal audience or a large audience or whatever the case may be, but the underlying thread there is a willingness to play the long game, where you might take like up to a year even to develop those kinds of partnerships, whichever one makes most sense for the kind of business model you have, or for the function that you're actually trying to partner up with to increase the capacity or throughput for inside of the business. It's really elegant the way that you've done it, because you now have very, very pretty logos on your website. And the moment somebody, yeah, go ahead.
And that helps, right? So like in the beginning, there's like nobody, but then now we have many integrations. Like we're at 12 or something, and we have several more sort of in the pipeline of things that need to get built. But then Decision Vault took part in the American Bar Association Tech Show about a month ago in Chicago, and I came in second place in the pitch competition there. So that was helpful because like second place in the pitch competition, and like, hey, look at this page on my website where I have logos of all your competitors. Like, do you want to also be an integration partner? Like that becomes a little easier conversation then, right?
Absolutely. You have also, in my opinion, you're a little bit prolific when it comes to like this outreach stuff. Tell us the story of you did a challenge to yourself once upon a time to reach out to, I don't even remember how many people in like how many days. Yeah, you got to tell that story.
So when I was living in Brussels, Brussels is a town of the the European Union, NATO, and of course, like just the government of Belgium. And it's not really a startup town, right? So I locally had been like going to some meetups and trying to like find some like-minded people. And then also through when I was I was going through RBT, I was in Ramit's Brain Trust, the online community program. And through there, I like set a challenge for myself to like in a weekend, reach out to 100 people. And like, I kind of increased with increasing sort of I wouldn't say difficulty, but more of like the stature of the person, right? So like, as part of that, I reached out to you, right? Like you're one of the ones in that cohort. I also reached out to Derek Sivers, who like sent me an email back. So I think at the time I was reading Nicholas Taleb's book on like the Black Swan, anti-fragility. So I reached out to some people to ask, like, they've mentioned something a lot online about that book, which was one part of the cohort of the 100. How did you implement that sort of in your day-to-day life, right? So that was kind of my question. So I had a clear question, and then I like brainstormed a bunch of people. I forgot where, like I maybe that was the hardest cohort of like the top 20 of the 100, where somebody just posting this online and somewhat more of a prominent blogger. So I send this to you. I send this to like Derek Sivert. I send this to a whole bunch of other people. And then through that, when I came to the US, then like 2 years later, like we sat down for dinner in DC, because I'd moved to DC and you were living in DC. And like with Derek Sivers, actually like 3 weeks before I left Brussels, he emailed me back and said, "Hey, you're in Brussels. Like, I'm going to be in Brussels. Like, we should have tea." So, like, I sat down with him for tea, and like we chatted about like travel and whatever. Awesome. So that was, yeah. So like little things you put like out in the world will come back in some way, right? But yes, that was kind of a challenge I ran on myself to like get out of hey, I'm in Brussels, there's nobody sort of here, there's not that many people here that are interested in technology and building startups and do these kind of things. So like, who else can I like connect with?
That is incredible. And for anyone that's listening and they don't, or watching and they don't have the context, Derek Sivers is the founder of this little, tiny giant called CD Baby from back in the day. And he's the kind of person who, folks like New York Times bestselling authors like Tim Ferriss would reach out to for advisory on how to grow. So kind of a big deal. That sir is incredible. And I know that we're coming up on time, but this is just a couple of rapid fire questions that I want to ask you, that I think will be fun for our people listening in. So if you're not building Decision Vault, like, what are we going to find you doing?
Well, yesterday I was skiing, trying to get one more day in towards the end of the season. I'm trying to break in my new ski boots. So skiing, like I have 2 small kids. So like last week we went to Phoenix for spring break. So that was fun. Yeah. And I you're always nudging me to like fly more drones. Like it's tricky in Denver sometimes, because in the winter it gets a little cold, and if there's snow on the ground, you don't really want to crash the drone into that. And in the summer it's like super hot. So we're coming up on sort of the ideal window. So like, yeah, I have to fly more drones.
And I think I don't know if you're still doing this, but were you teaching yourself to play the piano, or was this a xylophone? I forget like which instrument like you were.
Oh, piano. Yeah. I grew up playing piano. I have an electric piano. Lately the business has been like consuming too much of my time to really get to that. But like, yes, that is, I would like to do that more. That's why the hirings, the new hires will probably help with freeing up some time, not just for more product development, but also for a little bit more of that.
Pianos and drones. 100%. So I know folks there's a billion more questions I could be asking you. But one of the fun questions I like to start closing out on is, well, there's really 3. The first one is, what is one professional development book and one personal development book that you really have enjoyed? Could be even within the last year.
Yes, good question. So personal development, there's a book called Wink and Grow Rich, right? So like everyone knows the Think and Grow Rich, Andrew Hill, I think. Wink and Grow Rich. It's a parable And there's lots of lessons sort of hidden in the parable. So that one it's pretty interesting. It's kind of out of print, so you can buy the I think on Amazon they have the audio version, and then on the internet you can find the PDF, because there are some illustrations that they refer to, like, look at this illustration in the book. And I had listened to it several times through already, and then I looked at the illustrations and they were like very different from what I anticipated them to be. So that's a personal development book that kind of has had an impact on some of my thinking around like how to build and expand, both personally as well as in wealth sense, right? A professional development book, well, the Buy Back Your Time was impactful and helpful. So I think that would be a good one. If people haven't read the Mom Test, like, go read that book, because it'll help you become better at like product development in general, by focusing on asking the right questions. Maybe we'll leave it at those two for now.
Okay, I like it. This one's a little bit of a heavy one. If you could go back to before you launched Decision Vault, knowing everything you know now, is there any advice that you would give yourself?
Not really. Yes, there are some things that like, part of the journey was me diving deeper into these web development frameworks. So like I would make a couple of smaller changes, or make certain choices differently, building it up. But that's just more related to like what they call technical debt. So you build something a certain way, now you have to go back and fix it or live with it. No, I think it kind of just rolled in the right direction and like built out, and I've followed my own guidelines for how to build product, even though I'm still sort of discovering what those are. Like that's maybe a nuance to like how you mentioned it earlier, right? Like, yes, there is a process. Also, if it was just a process, everyone could do it, right? So like there's an element of taste that comes into this, or an element of intuition. Like, yes, there are all these different frameworks and all these different books on how to do it and how to get started and which questions to ask and which ones to avoid. And that's all great. And that's all sort of knowledge level stuff. But even if you stick to all and do all the right, quote unquote, right things, it might work, it might not. And the difference is just like, I don't know, intuition, taste. Like something looks good to some person, something does not look good to another person, right? There is an element of that to the whole journey of product development. So I, in the past, may have gotten too hung up on like, I'm going through this the wrong way, or like I'm making like these wrong choices, or I'm not like, I didn't ask that question in the right way. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like what matters is that you ask the next question, or like if you bomb like a customer interview, to do another one and then try to do it better. There's maybe one other one that maybe that has helped in the past. Years ago, Seth Godin did an in-person workshop in New York, and it was recorded, and it's called Startup School with Seth Godin, and it's published on the Earwolf, like ear, EAR, Earwolf podcast. It's like 13 episodes, and in there, there's lots of good sort of general advice and questions to ask yourself as you go through like building something, right? One of the things he says in there is like, we do it wrong until we do it right? Like, it's fine that you're doing it wrong. It's okay. It's expected. It's what's going to happen.
It makes me think of this statement that I've shared before, which is, it's like you have the science of product development, but there's also an art to product development as well. And artists, like you said, like there's an element of intuition, having an eye, and you're not going to see it until you create something and then get a chance to look at it and then decide what the next brush stroke might be, or the next line of code might be, or the next module inside of a course is what it's sounding like. And
the reason that you hold back is a little voice in the back of your mind that's telling you that it's like not working, or that's stupid, or that's like it was wrong, right? And it's the self, and get like that voice I'm very familiar with that voice again from like the hitchhiking days, right? That voice tells you that like there are no cars. This is stupid. Like, why are you doing this? And I have a talk on my LinkedIn page or my profile where I tell a story of walking. Like I was in Kosovo as part of this journey. I kind of like strung this route through several of the countries I was missing in Europe, and I came down through Serbia, and I spent the weekend in Pristina, Kosovo, and I was walking around town, and this was like the first on this journey. It was me alone, and I hadn't hitchhiked alone all that much. So like that was the first time, and it was like an environment I was less familiar with. You look over and you see white UN trucks drive by, right? So like normally you see those on the news of like places in the world where like it's bad news. I was like, oh, I'm standing next to this white UN truck. And I walked into the city park, and there's like all these signs everywhere that you cannot go off the path because there might still be landmines from the war that was there in 1999. So it's feeling like it was a little odd, feeling a little fearful. Yeah. And when it was time to move on and hitchhike south into Albania, I was walking out of town on Monday morning to the edge of town to start hitchhiking. And I had this like weird conversation going on in my mind where like the voice in the back of my mind was telling me that this is stupid, it's not going to go, not going to work. Like nobody's going to Albania, and like all these reasons why things wouldn't work. But I had done this enough where I could kind of acknowledge that and just act anyway. And that's sort of like, even after hitchhiking over 50,000 kilometers in my life, like that voice is still there, right? The voice doesn't go away. Like that's just your inner critic. That's what happens. But I kept walking, and I got to the edge of town, and I hold up a sign with like I had to do hitchhike by sign because of getting out of town. And I was feeling like an idiot, but it's the Balkans. Like it works. 10 minutes later, I was in a car. I was driving south. Like it's fine. But just that voice is there, and that voice will get in your way if you let it get in your way. But it takes sort of practice to like, you cannot really like fight. You cannot engage with it. You cannot fight with it. Just acknowledge it's there and try to do it anyway. And some days it works, and some days it doesn't. And that's it.
That is an excellent thought for us to go home with. You know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and that is life. And we can only
do it again.
Keep moving forward. Yeah, that's absolutely. Right. Keep chipping away. You know, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to share your story, all of your expertise. And if we're wanting to find out more about you, where can we do that?
I suppose either on LinkedIn or on decisionvault.com to see what I'm working on. Awesome. I don't really use Twitter or anything else.
Thank you so much. And with that, we will see you in the next episode. Hey, thanks for checking out the show. If you liked it, go ahead and hit the like button, and also subscribe so you don't miss another one. It also tells us which ones that you like the most so that we can then do more interviews like that. If you want to go from idea to implementation though, especially if you're wanting to productize your expertise so that you can scale your impact on your clients and of course grow your business, then join our email list. There we're going to talk about how modern consultants can productize their expertise so that they can have a greater impact on the world around them and live life on their terms. If that's up your alley, I hope to see you on the other side. Talk soon.